this the whole day. And every time any female so much as decides to move, she's going to be hounded by males. You can see as soon as one gets up, look, and then a whole bunch of others are up and moving around. Now there's quite interesting marking on one of the dogs. Is she's very, very light. Not that bunch there, this one here, I think it's a female, it might be a male, but the one at the back, look at how light it is, and it's got white socks. Do you see that? It looks as though it's got a perfect pair. Are you jealous, Senzo? It's got perfect pair of socks for you. You're gonna have to get some wild dog socks to match this female. But how cool are those little feet? It's the first time I've seen white socks on a wild dog. Generally they have white markings on the legs, but not all the way down and very clean like that lighter colored female. So look, you see now, one dog stood up, and this is what ensues after one dog standing up, is everybody comes in, white tails in the air, everyone's sniffing, everyone's carrying on. And the three older dogs that I was talking about earlier, look at their reaction to this process. Absolutely nothing. They are not interested in any way. It's all the young dogs that are causing it, and I wonder if maybe these three have not split off from somewhere else, and this is all a different pack on our right hand side. I'm not sure, but it's interesting that those three are in no way interested, but all these other ones are greeting and are trying to kind of sniff around and causing a little bit of a disturbance in amongst them. It's really interesting to kind of watch this process, and I honestly have no idea. Even Grant said to me, he's like, I honestly also has very little idea of what is going on and why they are doing this. There's a lot of these things that are just not understood at all, so it's very interesting to watch. Now it seems as though everyone's going to start settling down, except for those that are still trying to mate in a very odd way. Go, those three down again. Scottish, you're asking if they're bigger or smaller than household dogs. Well, at the end of the day, I suppose it depends on the household dog that you've got. They're about the size of, I'm just trying to think of a really good sort of size comparison. They're a slender version of an Alsatian, basically. An Alsatian would be maybe a slightly taller than a wild dog, not by much, but they are, obviously Alsatians are a lot more bulky and long-haired than what the dogs are. The dogs are not nearly as long-haired as them, but that's about the size that they would be. So they're a medium-sized dog, a household dog, I would say. Medium to large household dog would be their size. So they are relatively big, and I mean, in terms of the predators out here, though, unfortunately not very large at all. But what they don't have in size, they make up for in numbers and sheer just kind of intellect with those numbers and how they use them. They are very clever, and if they corner something much larger than them, there's cases of apparently dogs taking down buffalo, which I just can't even imagine. It's a struggle for lions, and yet these guys have managed to pull it off from time to time. So they really are incredible animals when it comes to hunting and when it comes to kind of getting the food that they require and also keeping themselves safe. So you'll find they'll accost. If a hyena came in here now, that hyena would be chased by the entire pack, bitten, and be completely abused by these guys. So they use their numbers to their advantage, much like wolves in that regard. So even though they're not the biggest, they will definitely still utilize each other and cooperate as a unit, which makes them seem a lot bigger. Oh, these poor females are having the toughest time. Digital Forge, you asking how do new dogs interact with packs, and what is the process of a new dog arriving? Do you get a situation where they are immediately welcomed into the pack, or do they have to shadow the pack for a while? Generally, you'll find if it's in conditions in breeding time and in the mating season, generally they just form part of the pack and they kind of are there, and you might find the alpha male getting a little bit upset if it's another male coming in, but otherwise they're fairly social. They don't mind other kind of packs joining, especially if they show submissiveness and they kind of come in and they're slow, and they will shadow for the first little bit. I mean, it'll be maybe a day or two that they'll kind of be on the fringes, but soon after, once they have rubbed up on the others and they take on the scent of the pack, because remember, they'll rub up on the others, and it's half of the kind of way that these guys understand each other is by scent. And so if they smell like each other, then they become very quickly, do they accept them. So it's just an initial day or two that is a little bit uncomfortable, but after that they're pretty much integrated integrated and part of the pack. And it's normally around food, because what happens is they kill something and that member then joins in and rubs up against them, and then that scent is just like the rest of them and is then accepted by the pack. And that's how puppies sometimes that have been orphaned and they then try and reintroduce them to a pack, is they'll actually dart a adult member and they'll rub the puppy on the adult member before they wake them up, and then they let them go like that, and generally, hopefully, then they accept them as part of the den and part of the puppies that they have had. So it's an interesting process, and how they use their olfactory sense to be able to try and work out who's who. Still young ones in the back that are looking around. Everybody else is starting to go to sleep now, but it's still the odd young one that's pottering about in the back. But I think they're beautiful. If you ask me, their markings are astounding. They've all got different coloration, all look slightly different, and I really think they kind of have these unique and intriguing coats, and it's always nice to see. What are you doing? That poor female, she is being hounded by that male. You can see she's got a little bit more of a delicate face than him as well, and a smaller muzzle than what he does. PT Watcher, you're asking, are these the dogs that they want to rename Painted Wolves? Well, they already have that name, so they either are called Wild Dogs, Painted Wolf, or African Painted Wolf is another one that they call them. So you can use either or, it's not a problem. It's just known as Wild Dogs generally by the South African sort of clientele. In some areas they will be called Painted Wolves, but I don't know, they don't look wolfy to me, so I like the Wild Dog name, and they are wild. They are completely crazy, these guys. Even though they do have that kind of painted coloured coat, they act like hooligans and are all over the show, and as we've seen this morning, mate like hooligans too. So wild is an appropriate name for them as far as I kind of figure it out, and so it's pretty cool to have that name for me. I mean, it's all different for everybody. Some people prefer different names, and so it's just each to their own, really. There's two in the background that are still trying, but it's really Buttons, there is a massive push to treat these domestic animals on the fringe of the reserve, to try and get them to not have distemper and rabies and those kind of things. But you also must remember, you're dealing with a population that is living well below the average income line. It's a poor area, it's a rural area, and they have difficulties in even providing food for their families, let alone treating their domestic animals for things like distemper and rabies. So it's really tough, but there is a lot of things going on. The state vets spend hours doing basically rabies clinics, as they call it, where they invite the community to bring all their animals, and they will treat them for distemper and rabies free of charge. They don't charge them anything to do it, and they really are trying to get as many dogs as possible. But it's not easy. It's really not an easy process to do. There's a lot of people that think that they are doing something bad to their dogs, and it's also about trying to then educate them that they're not, and trying to then get it down. But they are really working hard at it. There is a lot of rabies and distemper campaigns on at the moment to try and reduce the number of domestic animals that have it. They're also trying to do a lot of work with neutering and spaying of dogs, because unfortunately a lot of the dogs out here are not either of those, and that means that there is a huge number of dogs that are breeding out here, and the population is just escalating all the time. So they're trying to do free neutering and spaying, and just trying to control the population a little bit, and then also obviously try and control the amount of disease that's being spread by them. So yes, they are working on it, but it's a monumental task that they are trying to undertake. It is a lot of work, and it's going to take some time to get it right. They're not going to get it right very quickly, but they will get there eventually, and the more we can educate, and the more we have people from the communities working in areas like this, the better it's going to be. The more they're going to understand the value of trying to protect things like a wild dog, and then getting distemper and vaccinations for their animals that they have at home, and spreading that through the community and telling them what's going on. So yes, there is big projects, and there's a lot of sort of people working on it, but it is going to take time, and there's still going to be those that slip through the cracks. The problem with rabies in particular is the reason why it becomes such a big issue is that rabies is is when it affects an animal, the animal becomes completely disorientated. It doesn't know where home is, and so a lot of the rabid dogs end up drifting from their owners and going off then into the reserves, and that's why we see the issues that we do. But it's disease that once they've got it, it's very difficult to then find that animal and to treat it. So they've got to try and prevent it before it happens and find animals that are still with their owners and then sort them out there. But I like I say, I know for a fact, because I've some of my friends are the guys that are busy doing these campaigns and actually sterilizing and trying to sort of get into a situation where they are treating rabies and distemper, and they really are hard at work. They do every 2-3 days of the week. They're up and busy. Senzo, just watch these two. They're having a little game. See, the one is stalking the other one. Look how its head is low. That's how they would go into a stalk mode, and it's going to chase after. There we go. So they're just having a little game, chasing one another. Look, now he's down in this sort of submissive posture. He's like, don't run too far, come closer. I'm pretty sure it's because you... There we go, look. So it's all about games, fun and games at the moment with some of them. So cool to see. Patty, so wild dogs are found in various parts of Africa, not all Africa, and not only where we are located. Unfortunately, their range has declined massively. But wait, just listen to this. Oh, I thought they were going to start giggling a lot more. They have this little giggle and squeak. No, never quite. So, but basically with dogs, unfortunately, a lot of their range has been lost due to habitation of people. So we have a situation where a lot of the wild dog areas that they used to roam, there's people there that now farm, and dogs are lethal to farmers because they eat a lot and they kill a lot, and they get hold of sheep and goats and cattle and all that. And so a lot of them have been persecuted for that and pushed out. Then of course distemper and rabies has been a big issue, so they've lost a huge portion of their previous range. But where you do find wild dogs now is South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Tanzania. There are some dogs there. There are some dogs in Kenya as well. Sometimes you will get them in the Mara, but it's very seldom up that way. There are some in like Kipia and areas like that. And then Namibia, sometimes I think there's dogs that go in from Botswana into Namibia, if I'm correct. I'm just trying to think where else there are wild dogs. That's pretty much it at this stage. Those are the only countries. Zambia, that's the other one, is the last one. And there's actually a big project at the moment to try and start getting Zambian population of dogs up and trying to get them going, because here in South Africa, funny enough, we have some reserves that have got wild dogs, and the populations are exploding on those reserves, and we've actually got too many wild dogs from some reserves that there's dogs sitting in captivity with no homes. So you would think that a rare species like this, where you would think that dogs would want, people would want them in their reserves, is actually a situation where there's dogs sitting in bomas just kind of waiting to find some sort of home. And the problem with it is that they need a lot of space, so they can't just give them to anybody and be like, here's a pack of dogs on your small little, nature reserve. They need to be in an area where there's a lot of space, and it's also, they're a big cost to whoever has them. If it's a fenced off system, then you're going to have kind of have to replace a lot of what they eat, which is not going to be cheap. So they're trying to get them into the bigger parks and get them spread again back into their areas, but it's difficult. So hopefully they will be able to get them. I know they just released a pack into Northern Kruger, so the Northern Kruger lost its dogs through unfortunate poaching and snaring particularly. So a lot of dogs died from snares up that way, and there was no wild dogs north of Letaba at one point, but now we have a situation where the dogs have just been released up there. In fact, they were released, I think it was about 4 or 5 days ago, a nice big pack into the Shingwetsi region, which is quite far north in the Kruger, and hopefully that's going to be a positive sign, and those dogs are going to start populating up there, and we're going to get a much better distribution of dogs up in the Kruger Park northern sector. Anna Marie, you say this is one of the best wild dog sightings you've had in a long time. It is. I mean, we've had very few wild dog sightings recently, and so we've been seriously spoiled by this sighting. And it's been a fascinating one in that it's been unusual behavior. It's something that we don't see very often. There's also a lot of mystery involved, which I will research after drive and try and chat to Grant, and we'll try and work out exactly what's going on and who every individual is that is here, because I think they'll still be around in the afternoon, and we will spend some time with them. But it has been a serious pleasure, and I have been spoiled this morning. And it's for me to leave tracking a leopard when I know that leopard is right there, that I can hear Franklin's and a monkey's alarm calling. It means that it's something special that has to drag me away from that. So I have been spoiled this morning. I've been really looked after, and it definitely is a very special thing to be able to be a part of seeing something like this, and seeing these rarer individuals in action and moving around is really quite special. So indeed, we have been spoiled, and not only here. It's just insane to think that we've had wild dogs here in the Sabi Sands, big elephant bulls. We've had cheetah this morning. We've had 2 beautiful male lions, chubby little lion cubs. Between the Mara and the Sabi Sands, on days like today, it's just phenomenal. And who would have thought that we would have had that kind of spectrum of animals in a morning game drive? Now, I mean, if a leopard had to arrive, or hyenas, we'd have leopard and hyena. Maybe that's going to be our sort of goal for this afternoon, to complete the predator sort of cards, and to have all of the big predators of Africa seen in one day would be just a very, very special thing for Safari Live. I don't think we've had a situation where we've had every single big predator in one day. I'm not sure, maybe we have, but it'll be super cool if we can do it. I think we have done it once. We've had the wild dogs with Ali, and I had lions, and I think we then got a leopard as well, and cheetah and lion. So we've had them all before. I think we missed hyenas that day, but we'll try this afternoon to try and complete our kind of big predator, so to speak, numbers, if that's what you want to call it. I don't know what you would call it. A big predator list. There we go. That's the best name for it. But these dogs make me laugh. There we go. There's a dog now. It's just up and running for some reason. I don't know why. It's just decided to go trotting. Or maybe it's got a little itch or something. They do sometimes carry fleas and various other things, so it just got up and started running. I'm not sure why, and there we go. It's going to cause trouble again and wake everybody else up. Papadano, wild dogs, no, they don't suffer from hip dysplasia because they don't live long enough. So, as I was saying earlier, it's very difficult. We very seldom do we see wild dogs going over 7 years of age. Even though they can live to 12 in captivity, they very seldom in the wild are going over 7 years. And so to get hip dysplasia is generally later in their lives, and the dogs just don't live long enough to start showing symptoms of it. Also, they haven't been kind of inbred and crossbred and all kinds of other things, which is what hip dysplasia starts to happen, is when those kind of things happen. So generally, no, they are right, and they move around, but they do start to get older, and when they sort of go past 7 years, they start to slow up a little bit. And it's like any animal. I mean, any animal that gets older, there will be some weakening of the bone structure. There will also be atrophy of the muscles, and so I suppose a little bit of hip dysplasia might take place if they're in a captive environment and they get to sort of 11, 12 years old. But at this stage and in this kind of time frame that they're alive, no, we don't see it at all. I've certainly never seen it with wild dogs. And even if they did get it, you'll find these dogs will push their way through it. They'll make a plan. I've seen a dog with only 2 legs and still surviving and moving around and participating and being part of the pack. So it just goes to show, even in a situation where they've got 2 legs and nothing else, they'll make a plan. And so even with hip dysplasia, they would make a plan and try and get this kind of thing sorted and done. So pretty interesting. It carries on again.